But what I can do is when I upload it to YouTube, potentially we can have the closed captions turned on there.
Perfect.
Great. Well, wonderful. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to be doing an AMA with the team over at Blend. We have a really fantastic group here today, including 2 of our former on-ramp apprentices who are now full-time software engineers at Blend. We're going to do a quick round of introductions and I'll repeat this again afterwards, but for those of you joining us, we're going to be using the Q&A box instead of the chat. So I'm actually going to turn chat off. And then for anybody who has questions, please put them in the Q&A. And then what I'm going to do after the introductions is kind of go through and share those questions popcorn style to the panel. If there is somebody on the panel that you want to ask a question to specifically, just mention their name in the question and I'll make sure that they know it's for them. But otherwise, I'll just put it out there for whoever wants to answer it. And panelists, just jump into any question that feels like a good fit for you to answer. And we'll go through them that way. So hi, everyone. My name's Dana. I'm the head of talent at OnRamp. If you have applied, sent a chat, sent an email, you have received tons of communication from me. If you've done an interview with us, you have probably met me there as well. I'm so excited to see so many of you here. This is going to be our second cohort with Blend. We absolutely love working with this company and with this team. And I'm really excited for you all to meet some of the people that are a part of this dynamic and really interesting company. So I'm going to pass it over to Jenna and let you pick up from there. And then if you wouldn't mind just passing it on to the next person after your intro.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dana. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna. I manage emerging talent at Blend. So in addition to apprenticeship hiring, I also hire interns and new grads into Blend. So really excited to be here. Really excited, as Dana mentioned, to be bringing in our second cohort of apprentices. This is our third cohort, but our first year was with a different partner. So we really love the partnership with OnRamp and really excited to bring in such amazing talent. I will pass it over to Megan, who is one of our former apprentices.
Hi, everyone. Megan McDevitt. I started in this last cohort as an apprentice. I used to be a professional musician and music teacher and did the career switch after boot camp and many months of working on this career transition. And then started this apprenticeship in March and converted to full-time at the end of July. So I'll pass it to Audra.
Yeah, hello, my name is Adjua. So similar to Megan, I also did a career transition, but before I was working more in business, was an accountant for a little bit and then did more like e-commerce stuff. So that for a couple of years. Went to boot camp and then started the Blend apprenticeship in the same cohort as Megan and then transitioned to full-time in July. So I've been working at Blend since then as a software engineer. And I'll go ahead and pass it off to Rahul.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rahul Grewal. I'm an engineering manager on the loan applications team at Blend. Been at Blend about 3 years. Been in the software industry for about 15. Worked at Uber and Microsoft previously. Love the energy at Blend, love everyone who works there, and I've actually been the beneficiary of this amazing apprenticeship program. Megan is actually on my team. She's added a lot of value, and so it's great to see this program continue.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. I wanted to ask, somebody mentioned in the Q&A that my voice is breaking up. Is everyone able to hear me okay? Panelists, can you give me a thumbs up? I'm not breaking up. Okay, I'm at my brother's house. He lives in the woods. So if need be, I can turn my video off so the audio comes through clearly. Just let me know if it continues to be a problem. For anybody just coming in, if you have any questions for the panel, please add them to the Q&A box. I'm going to be monitoring that for the entirety of the AMA and sharing it with the panel. So let's just jump in. Let's see here. We'll start with, let's see. Yeah, let's start here. What's the onboarding process like for new employees, and is it different for apprentices?
I can share high level, and then if one of the apprentices want to jump in and talk a little bit more about your exact experience. So you're onboarded as a full-time employee at Blend. So in all of our talent programs that we have, emerging talent programs, if you're an intern or apprentice, we call it full-time short-term. So what that means is we want that to look like a full-time onboarding. So you onboard with Blend. One call out is that there is a month training with the on-ramp team before you are officially onboarded into Blend, but that's probably a question we'll get to later. But so there's a 1 month training with on-ramp. You join Blend, you're fully onboarded alongside other full-time employees. You attend Blend U, which is a good way for you to get introduced to what Blend does and all the different departments and kind of how you're going to be impacting this North Star that we all have. And then you get onboarded specifically onto your teams as if you're a full-time employee as well. And so I think, Raul, maybe you have some call outs on what you did potentially different with Megan to make sure that she was ramped up and ready to go, but it is very similar, if not exactly the same, to full-time onboarding.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think Jenna, you covered all the points. Yeah, definitely in terms of onboarding, it's very similar to other hires. I would say maybe for apprentices, I try to make sure they get a variety of projects so they can learn different parts of our tech stack and they feel a little more comfortable, a little more included in the team. Yeah.
Great. So this question is for Adjoa and Megan. What's been the best experience of the apprenticeship journey for you, whether it be a technical project or some other memory?
I can go. I guess for me, the best experience has been just like the variety of things I've been able to work on and just also being given the responsibility, almost as like a full-time employee kind of was mentioned earlier, to jump in and start making an impact on the team. Because originally with apprenticeship, I wasn't sure kind of like how things were going to be structured. Like I knew it was a learning opportunity, but wasn't exactly sure like how that was going to play out actually being on the team. And I think the best part for me was realizing that like, okay, this is what it's like being a professional software engineer. And I'm going to be able to learn how to do that throughout this whole apprenticeship program, basically. And then be comfortable converting into a full-time role.
Yeah, I would say a similar thing, but also to add to that, just like getting to know the people on my team and to learn from them because they're all like really intelligent, experienced engineers, and it's really been a pleasure to learn from them and to interact with them because they're lovely people as well.
I want to let our participants know that if you have any questions about the application process, deadlines, how we decide, anything like that, please feel free to email them to support@onramp.io. We're not going to be answering application-specific questions here. This is more about the experience at Blend, the apprenticeships, the apprentices experience, coming through the apprenticeship. But if you're asking about like your personal application, feel free to just email that to me at support. I have a couple people asking about, Blend is a remote first culture. And so there's a few questions about what that's like, what people can expect if they were to be hired at Blend and any complications that the company may have faced in being a remote first company.
I can give it a shot. I've been at Blend 3 years. I've actually been remote the entire time. But since the pandemic started, as a company, at least definitely as engineering, we've been all remote. So I have seen, some of the challenges that come with remote work around, being able to collaborate at the same scale, being able to build good relationships. But I would say to some extent, everyone going remote has kind of helped. I think a lot happens over Zoom now that, previously didn't used to. And so it kind of has at least made me feel more included, even though I've been remote. I would say probably there are some challenges specifically around, if you want to have sort of like a deep technical discussion, if you want to whiteboard something, that has been hard to do, but a lot of these things do have solutions. And so we're always looking at, what's the best technology we can use around, say, shared whiteboarding, or what's the right way to share context amongst each other. And also, what's the best way to do sort of team events over Zoom? That's also a challenge, but it's more fun.
We have someone asking, what software development methodology does Blend utilize?
I might ask for the question to be maybe a little bit more specific. At a general scale, we use an agile methodology. So, we have quarterly planning, 2-week-long sprints. But I'm happy to answer like a more maybe specific question around how we work, if there is one.
I'll see if he writes in an amendment. That was Joshua Love, if you want to amend that question. Kevin wants to know about the projects that the apprentices worked on during their apprenticeship.
Okay, so for me, I had a more longer term project in the team I work on. It's disclosure, so it's like a part of the mortgage process. And I had a project that was more so around basically like moving around some certain systems within disclosure. So for emails, that was my project, just trying to like, we built out like a new system for email. So just trying to figure out like how to send emails through like a different way. So that was what I worked on for the past couple of months. My team is backend, so that was like more backend things that I needed to do. And in this situation, there was already a process built out to send emails. So it was more so just figuring out how to transfer it to a different system. So yeah, it was more so like working with the team and trying to get context into what I needed to do. Also trying to figure out like, as I'm moving things over, like, is there ways that could have been improved? Is there things that I need to like account for that maybe wasn't accounted for before? So it was a lot of just like collaboration plus like me learning like ways to improve things as well.
Yeah, I think like once you finish the training month and you're on your team, generally you're kind of just another engineer on the team. Like the expectations, I think, are a little bit different from like a more experienced person. But my experience was that I get to work with someone who was a little more experienced than I was on, or a lot more actually, I should say, on a front end project. Our team is Fullstack. And so I was able to make some changes pretty quickly, which was exciting to see that go out. And then I worked on a project that was mostly front end with a little bit of back end that was more on my own, kind of similar to what Adjoa said, where it was sort of me like leading the project, but sort of bringing in people to try to understand what I needed to do and what the context was. And now I'm working on more of a back-end refactor project with a very experienced engineer, and I'm learning a ton there. So it was a sort of a nice progression.
Next question is, how would you characterize the company's overall management style?
I can attempt this, and then Megan and Adjoa can correct me if they see the management style as being different. One of the things that makes Blend unique, in my opinion, is the amount of autonomy teams and individuals have. We really believe one of our cultural principles is empowerment over control. And so we believe in giving, hiring top talent and giving them accountability and trust to make the right decision for their projects. There's very little top-down direction that you'll get. It's more around overall accountability for making sure the project is a success, and then you get to pick the path you want to take. Of course, your team will ask you questions around, certain decisions you're making, what the rationale is, but ultimately you get to sort of make those decisions, share that rationale, have those discussions that will help you grow. But yeah, that's perhaps the most important part of the management style.
Yeah, well, I'll just second, and Adjoa, Megan, please chime in too. I think that type of environment really allows for a lot of development. We've seen interns, apprentices do really well because you're forced to do some problem solving on your own, which I think is the best way to learn in some of these environments. And so, yeah, I joined Blend actually because of this management culture that they had and wanting to up level myself, right? And putting myself in situations where nobody is making decisions for you and you really have that autonomy. So definitely think being up leveled is something that is talked about a lot at Blend, at least on the manager side, and trying to up level our teams.
I sign off on those descriptions.
Next question is for Jenna. You mentioned the North Star. What is Blend's overall mission?
Yeah, so overall mission is really to bring more simplicity to the lending process. So really, I think you think about that in multiple different ways, right? On the back end, it's working with our banking customers to really bring some simplicity to them, but long term, right, is that consumer impact that we'll be able to have, thinking about how to make these lending processes more seamless, and also for us to all get a better understanding, right? Some more financial literacy along the way, so that things like, right, the 2008 market crash, housing crash doesn't happen again. So long term is just really, as I said, that consumer impact on the lending process. But we do that by partnering with our banking clients.
One quick thing I can add there is, over the last few years, Blend has sort of taken on a more expanded scope of products that we're building into consumer finance. So, we started off in mortgage, which is sort of a very fairly complicated, compliance-heavy area, to a lot of other products, whether it's auto loans, personal loans, digital account opening. And so really, we're looking at the overall set of things around consumer finance and trying to make that experience simpler, more transparent, more accessible for both borrowers and lenders.
Next question is, what are the biggest challenges that someone in this position would face? And I think I can kind of marry that to a question. Yeah, an apprentice. I might be able to marry that to another similar question that's sort of like, for Adjoa and Megan coming from a non-traditional, like non-CS background, how did you manage things like imposter syndrome or that sort of thing when onboarding into this experience?
I think for me, maybe the biggest challenge I faced was like, because coming from from a boot camp like background and like doing the training month and stuff, one of the things that I didn't really get too much practice into was like testing, and then understanding like that flow, understanding how, like, I know, and like at least when I did the boot camp, I did a lot of work with other people within my cohort and like working and collaborating, but didn't really get too much practice with like things like pull requests, like in GitHub, like reviewing with your team when you are developing things. Another thing I didn't get practice with too much as well was like figuring out how much of this do I need to make decisions for, and how much of this is like working with other people on my team to collaborate and make decisions. So I think throughout the apprenticeship months, and then finally being converted, those are things I definitely got practice with. I think, to be honest, for me, I wouldn't have gotten those types of experiences if I hadn't been in a professional environment. So it's not to say that it's always something you can learn before. Like if you do have exposure to it, definitely that's great. But if not, I think that's why I really like the apprenticeship program, because I feel like I was able to get exposed to those things and be able to really practice on that and get feedback from my managers within the apprenticeship to kind of understand if I'm doing this well, or if there's things that I'm not doing well, how can I continue to like build and develop on those experiences.
Yeah, I would say testing was a big thing for me too. I had not done a lot of testing before. And also I think just when you're learning, in my experience, you're not really faced with like a really large code base. And once I started on my actual team and started looking through the code, there's just so much of it. And there are like specific stylistic choices that we have at Blend that I wasn't necessarily used to seeing. We use a lot of Lodash, for example, and it was like very overwhelming to like try to figure out where, like, this thing that's displaying here, like where do I find that in the code? So yeah, so that was like a big learning curve, I think.
Next question is for probably Rahul or Jenna. Can you discuss how teams are created? Is it based on personality and aptitude or at random?
Meaning, Rahul, you can go ahead, but I would want to get some clarification on like just general teams or apprenticeship placements. But Rahul, if you have an answer to.
Yeah, I think that's a better question. I was assuming it meant software teams, but yeah, maybe I can answer for software teams. It's definitely based more on just product lines and features that we want to build. One of the things we have at Blend is a microservice architecture. So typically you'll have a team responsible for one or more microservices, and so they're formed along those lines. But if the question was something else, that's what would be different.
I can jump in and just say about like at least apprenticeship matching, because if you don't have that question, you might. We identified managers who were excited to bring on apprentices and who had the bandwidth to bring on apprentices onto their team. And so what we did was we had 4 apprentices, 4 hiring managers. Once we made the hires is when we decided where we would team match. All of them are brought on as full stack, but as Audra mentioned, right, her team was a little bit more back end. Megan's team is truly full stack. So we were trying to match 2 skill sets. And then again, it was a lot around like what managers and what teams were really going to have the bandwidth and be able to provide a strong experience for our apprentices.
Next question is, what was the top non-technical piece of advice you received from working and interning with Blend? And I would say, even for Jenna and Rahul, if you want to offer what the top non-technical piece of advice you would give to someone who might be working and interning at Blend.
Yeah, I can take this one for sure.
Okay.
So a really great piece of advice, or I got a piece of feedback early on from Rahul actually, that was around asking questions. And essentially it was like, be really thorough with your research before you ask the question. Make sure that you know what you've tried, what exactly the problem is. Can you articulate it, what you've tried, and what you need it to do, so that when you're asking a question, you're not like putting more work on the people that you're asking. They don't have to like do any research necessarily to like understand what you're talking about. So I think that was a really good piece of like communication advice.
I think one of the, well, I guess like the top technical advice that I kind of learned, I guess, throughout Blend was how to receive feedback. So I think one of the things my manager kind of talked to me in the beginning about, and kind of as I was going throughout the experience, was just making sure that, like, you know, if I'm receiving feedback, like, how am I actually going about doing something with it? So if it's like keeping track of, like, let's say, for instance, they say something around like, oh, we need you to, I don't know, like Megan said, like communicate with like questions and how to get better with asking those, and like including all your research and stuff. Like, how do you go about implementing that, and how do you go about like making sure that that feedback is basically being heard and you're like going and iterating on that and improving. So that was something that was like really stuck with me in my time at Blend, and kind of even continuing on.
And then I'll add to a little bit to Megan's point, right, is, you know, it's not also asking questions. There's definitely a strategic way to do that, but then also not being afraid to follow up, right? The goal of this apprenticeship period is for apprentices to learn how to be full-time engineers at Blend or elsewhere, right, in the future. And so really making sure that as you're asking questions, that if you're not grasping the concepts, it's okay to ask again or leverage another one of your engineers to try to get a different perspective, because they might explain it in a way that clicks with you better. So really utilizing that apprenticeship time as learning and not being afraid to ask questions and repeat questions if needed.
I'll add really quickly just some generic advice, fairly generic, but maybe more applicable in an apprenticeship position. Just focus on growth. Asking questions is one way to do it. Doing research ahead of time, it's really for you more than anything. It's you putting in your best foot forward to try and answer it for yourself. You'll do some learning there. When you ask someone, there'll be additional learning you can do from there. And so, yeah, just focus on your growth and make sure you enjoy it. I would say software engineering as a career is a little bit different than other careers in that almost every 5 to 10 years, the frameworks that we use change, and you'll have to do a lot of additional learning to just it'll be continuous lifelong learning. So make sure you enjoy this, find ways of enjoying it. There's different parts of software development. There's front end and back end that are fairly different. There's machine learning, which is a different area. There's data processing, which is quite different. So, you know, figure out the area that really appeals to you, and make sure you really love doing it. Yeah.
Thanks for all those answers. I had about 3 people in a row asking the same question, so I'll put it out there. What is a typical day in the apprenticeship role like?
So yeah, well, maybe I'll say like what a typical like week is like more, because every day is a little bit different, but generally it's pretty similar to just a day in the life of a software engineer. You have a stand-up, you might have a sprint planning or a sprint retro that's once every 2 weeks. We like met with our managers every week, still do one-on-one check in with Jenna and Dana once in a while. And other than that, you're kind of you're maybe like arranging meetings yourself because you have questions you want to ask. You're putting time in people's calendars. You're asking questions on Slack, and you're working on your tickets. So we each had a mentor on our team also. So in my case, my mentor was pretty available and kind of left it to me to check in with him whenever I needed. So some weeks I checked in with him pretty much every day, usually toward the beginning. And as the apprenticeship went on, I sort of like checked in with him less and less. So yeah, but it's pretty free, like it's pretty open, sort of like on the point of the management style earlier. You're kind of trusted to work on your own for the most part and leverage your team whenever you need.
Yeah, so like what Megan said, basically the same, like, yeah, a typical day, especially if it's not meetings, sprint planning, all of that stuff is working on the tickets that you are assigned. And yeah, just like working through that.
Yeah, although in the training month, it's a little bit different. Like we had a little more structure, I think. But even then we were pretty free to, it was just the 4 of us working on a project together. So we had a lot more meetings, I think.
Yeah, but to like second that point, I think the structure of that was so when you come into Blend, it's kind of the same in sense of like I felt like with the training month we did have like sprint planning, meetings, all of that stuff, and I feel like when I went over to Blend, it was almost the same in sense of like, yeah, you have your sprint planning, you have your meetings, but these are your tickets, this is what you're assigned, and this is gonna what you kind of have to work through throughout the week. And if you have questions, you can like make meetings with other people or something.
Next question is for Rahul. What are you looking for in a candidate, and what are some things that can make a candidate stand apart from the rest?
Yeah, I think that maybe one of the primary things is just a passion for technology. This manifests in different ways. It could be, them attending different kinds of boot camps, or it could be them working on projects on the side or doing some kind of volunteer works in the open source software industry. But it shows up in different ways, and to some extent, it also shows up as people coming in with sometimes a preference for, okay, I did this work, I did it to a certain amount of depth, and I really enjoy it. Just seeing that people have put in the time to figure out, if this is something they really like, and that they really enjoy doing it. I think that's probably one of the most important things. I would say like a growth mindset is also very important. Obviously, as an apprentice, there's a lot of growth ahead of you. And so just being okay with, not being great at a lot of things, being humble and saying, yes, there's a bunch of things I have to learn. I'll go and learn them. So sort of being open about the things that you don't know is also great. But yeah, I would say passion for technology is probably the most important one.
This is a great question. They say that they've read you have to learn how to ask for help when learning new features, like how to be more specific about what your issue really is. What's the best way to ask for help if needed?
I can attempt this. I would say, yeah, the best way is really just trust your team. One thing that can make people a little bit uncomfortable asking questions is, when they don't know how they'll be received. So I would say, build to some extent relationships with your team members. I ask people on my team to just have one-on-ones with each other at some kind of cadence. We try to have, team events at times. We have like a sprint planning and a sprint demo day at the end of the sprint. All of this is to make sure that we see ourselves as a team and we see our accountabilities as something that as a team we have to accomplish. And if someone is struggling, it behooves the team to make sure that we're making ourselves available for them. Going back to like asking questions, yeah, just figure out who you think is the best person, maybe load balance a little bit and ask questions. And there's some amount of calibration I'll have to do along the way. Like Megan mentioned some of the feedback I'd given her. That's totally fine. It's not that she was doing anything wrong. She was figuring out the balance of how much work to do before asking a question, and that's totally fine. But yeah, definitely ask questions. The bigger problem is not asking questions and trying to do too much yourself, trying to get stuck. It's better to err on the other side. Much easier to correct because the problem becomes more apparent, and it's not a big problem either.
What's a benefit of working at Blend that you think everyone should know about?
I'll let maybe Megan and Ajwa answer. I might sound a little too salesy if a manager says this.
I was thinking the same thing.
Just like any benefit, like anything.
Yeah, I guess like what's been your favorite benefit?
Oh, probably. Well, this is like an actual like benefit, but during like the pandemic, when I came to Blend, and then I realized I think there's like a stipend for like mental health, specifically around like counseling and all of that stuff. Thought that was really cool because I like companies I worked at before, I didn't see that. But why I mentioned that is like during the pandemic, I saw, because I kind of came into it when they were trying to figure out their remote policy and all of that. And I saw that there was a lot of work being done behind the scenes, like pretty frequently, to figure out like what are the best things you could provide for employees as they're working from home. So like one thing that was done last year, which I don't think they phase it out for next year, but we had like extra mental health days off like once a month. Blend took off like as a company, especially depending on your team, of course. Like if you guys have something to do, then that's up to you. But majority of the time, like everyone took that off for that one day as like a mental health day. So I thought that was really cool that they tried to basically kind of listen to the employees and then figure out ways to make working at Blend, especially remotely, a lot better.
Yeah, another like kind of specific benefit-y thing is that like I think when you work in the office, they have a lot of meals provided, but when everything went remote, now you get an extra stipend that's like $20 a day for food. So that's like kind of a sweet deal to get. And just overall, I think one of my favorite like benefits at Blend is just like knowing that we're making a really good product that is has the potential to help a lot of people, digitizing mortgage in particular, mostly because I work on the mortgage side of things, but just like knowing that it will be more accessible for people is like a really nice benefit for me, that it's a company that's sort of actually doing something good for the world.
I'll jump in once. This is not salesy, but something I personally think is really cool. In addition to both what Megan and Ajwa said, we also, as a full-time employee, so if you were to get converted as a full-time employee after your apprenticeship, you get access to a financial advisor. And I think that that's something that's really awesome that Blend is doing, because we're putting our money where our mouth is a little bit, right? So making sure that our employees can set themselves up for financial success as well.
Yeah, those all sound like amazing perks, y'all. The next question is a little more global. What are some of the challenges that the company is facing right now, and what gets you most excited about the company's future?
I can give this a shot. Possibly one of the biggest challenges we're facing as a company is we're scaling from sort of a smaller number of product lines to a much larger number of product lines. we started off with mortgage, as I mentioned earlier, and now we're going to all these different product lines around consumer finance. It's a very sort of broad area. There's lots of different products, lots of different features to build. And one challenge we have is, well, how do we make sure any work we do in one area is applicable to other areas? How do we make sure that we scale across multiple partners? So for instance, we have over 310 vendor partners that we work with. They all have slightly different requirements around the way the application should look, what kind of data should be collected. So making sure that these things are configurable and we can easily onboard new customers. To some extent, we're building this sort of global platform that all lenders can use. And that's very challenging because the requirements are very different. So figuring out how to scale ourselves across such a large customer base and such a large set of requirements is a big challenge. And yeah, I would say what makes me hopeful for the future is just the set of people that we have working at Blend that are taking on these challenges. In general, Blend is a very mission-oriented company, very mission-focused. I've worked at a lot of companies, and I would say, the kind of passion and energy people have at Blend is something I haven't seen before. So that's something that gets me up in the morning and makes me want to work at Blend.
Rahul, let me know if you need a job in recruiting.
Right. So this next question, I guess, is a little bit more global too. I looked at the company's site to understand what you do. Can you please explain how you actually interface with your customers? Are you selling API access or a white labeled application?
I can take a shot of this. Joe, if you want, go right ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say to what the question she asked, and like whether it's a white labeled application. So yeah, basically what we're doing is we sell the white labeled application to our customers. So like kind of how Rahul was mentioning earlier, like we have different customers that require like different, I guess, requirements when for their mortgage process. We basically sell this product to them, and depending on like what their requirements are, we work with them in terms of like any configurations that they need, any specific things to their system that maybe we can help build out. It depends on like what it is, but yeah. So at the top level, we sell white label application, but specifics are kind of handled as they're requested or like as they come in.
Next question is, what programming languages do you usually use on your projects?
We mostly use TypeScript. There's some repos we have that are in Go. I think there might be some in Python too, if you're more on the infrastructure side. But most of what we do is in TypeScript. We use React with TypeScript, Node with TypeScript. We use Postgres and Mongo. We use a lot of Lodash. We use Jest and Ava for testing. I don't know if I'm missing something, but feel free to fill in.
What's your culture like, and how do you foster it on a remote team?
So yeah, we have some cultural principles at Blend. I can talk about them, and maybe Megan and Joa, you can share how you've experienced it. So some of those cultural principles, like one of them I talked about earlier, empowerment over control. Another one that I really love is confident humility. And the idea here is we take on big challenges. We're confident enough to take them on, but we're also humble enough to take feedback, to check in with the rest of our team along the way. One place where this sort of manifests is we have this notion of an RFC process where anytime you're building a large project, which will take like more than a month or so, you'll create something called an RFC, which is sort of like a top-level, high-level architectural design doc, and you'll share it with all of engineering. So this is your opportunity to both share your design with engineering and also get feedback from everyone in engineering around what can you do better, or what kind of dimensions can you change to make sure the work you're doing is reusable a year down the line for a different team, or what work can you reuse that has already been done at Blend. So in terms of how do we foster in remote teams, definitely making sure our culture persists across, this move to remote work. That's obviously very important. So we've continued doing a lot of these sort of things that we do to make sure, we're giving each other feedback, for instance. Maybe one other way that we're making sure we do this is we have like quarterly as well as annual awards around people who really portray certain qualities that are aligned with those principles. And we do have like awards that are given out around them. So I think that's also a cool way of just reminding each other the kind of culture we want to keep building.
How does Blend make sure that apprentices and engineers are growing professionally and learning?
Oh, you want to go, Jenna? Oh, okay. At least for my team, I think definitely having my manager. So I had a manager and then also a mentor. So throughout the apprenticeship process, at least, I met with my mentor pretty regularly, with my manager once a week. So in that meeting with my manager, that's where I would just kind of discuss like what I wanted out of the apprenticeship process, what was expected of me in the apprenticeship process, and also talking more long-term about just my career in general, like things that I could look out for, maybe that Blend is providing that I don't have visibility into, that would be helpful for me as I'm developing my career. We also have one thing that my manager like pointed me to, which was helpful for me just to learn in general, was Udemy. So for Blend, we have like the option for you to take like Udemy courses for free. So that was something that definitely my manager like pushed me on, and something that I kind of took advantage of throughout the apprenticeship process. And one thing Megan mentioned a lot earlier was we also do meet with Jenna pretty regularly, and Dana in the beginning, even after you're done with your training month. And that was helpful for me just in general to understand what is it that is expected from us in the apprenticeship process, any questions that I had throughout the process that maybe I could ask Jenna that in general she could ask someone about if I was confused about something. So I think there was a lot of support, especially at that beginning, going through the apprenticeship. And then now that I'm in the full-time role, I still have access to my mentor. So I tend to like meet with him regularly as well, just to ask questions and understanding things that I could be doing to improve as a software engineer. And then my manager as well, meeting with them once a week at least. And that is where I'm able to really understand at a higher level, like what is going on at Blend and things that I could be looking out for that would be helpful to my growth.
Yeah, I want to second what Ajwa said. And basically, like, essentially, my experience has been that every engineer at Blend that I've asked a question to has given me a really thoughtful and detailed response. So I think like if you're like you set your goals with your manager for your career, and like they like help you, get projects that will make you learn more. But also with your own initiative, like going and asking questions, like if you have like a question about a specific part of the code and you figure out who wrote that part of the code and you ask them, they'll give you a really thoughtful answer. And so you're just constantly learning, and people are making it really easy for you to learn.
One thing to add around here is growth is definitely where it's at. This is the most important thing for a lot of apprentices. It's also a very important thing as a manager to make sure people on your team are growing. So for instance, some of the things we do around helping ensure everyone's growth is we have performance review cycles that happen twice a year. This is a sort of more formal way where we share feedback, share opportunities for improvement. There's also a very open culture of feedback where feedback is given and received at Blend. We do this very often in one-on-ones. And definitely I can say as a manager, this is one of the things that, for instance, I'm evaluated on is how much am I doing to ensure that people on my team are growing? This is something I talk to in my one-on-ones with my manager, where I talk about each person, what are the things I can do for them. So it's definitely top of mind at the manager level as well.
I also want to just quickly, Dana, sorry, going off tangent here, but I think this also brings it back to that question asked before, like what's a good piece of non-technical advice? But I think I've told Megan and Adjoa this probably multiple times during the course of our meetings, but reminding yourself that your managers can't read your mind. And so being able to discuss the growth is so important, right? Like, because you can have a great manager like Raul who's really ready to invest in you and to invest in your growth, but you have to make sure that you outline exactly what that looks like. So not being afraid to have those conversations is huge.
I think this next question kind of dovetails with a lot of what you just said. As a follow-up, how do Blend teams deal with failing and making mistakes?
Yeah, definitely. Again, I'll take my shot, and Adjoa and Megan, feel free to sort of speak based on your experiences. But anytime you're taking on an ambitious goal, some percentage of times you will fail. In fact, if you succeed all the time, you're probably just not taking on a big enough goal. And I would say, failures do happen. One thing we try to do at Blend is make sure that we learn from those failures, and also make sure that we execute in a way that we fail fast. So for instance, if there's a feature that we're building, we're always trying to figure out what's the MVP or the minimum viable product we can build and get this in front of customers, get feedback from them, learn from that. And so that's our way of making sure that what we're doing is along the right path. And if it's not, then we can course correct. So definitely there's a lot of learning and to be taken from failures, and that's how we approach them.
Yeah, and to kind of go off of what Earl was saying, yeah, like a lot of that is like ways we get to go about, like failures and things at Blend. But another thing that I find cool is like even after the fact, in certain situations where there's a failure that we want to avoid, like maybe there's an issue in production and figured out what the issue is, we've done that. Afterwards, there's always a process around like what went wrong. So people document that, like what went wrong, what was the issue, how do we discover the issue, and what could be prevented next time so that we don't run into that issue, or what can we do now to build out processes to have that in place. So next time if this issue does come and it does arise, hopefully it's fixed, but let's say if it's something that wasn't fixed, or it's something that it could be an issue in the future, we know how to account for it so we don't run into that again. Or if it does happen, we know exactly how to go about figuring it out and solving it. So I think that's one thing that's cool about the Blend culture. Like people are very open about things that don't work because it makes it helpful for everybody to know how to avoid to not do that again next time.
And this seems like even another follow-up question. What are the core values that Blend promotes in the workplace?
Rapidly trying to Google the core because we have a list. Raul, you spoke to a few of them.
Yeah, I can sort of go over. I think we have four main ones. There's empowerment over control, confident humility, decisions over outcomes. So the previous one I've spoken about decisions over outcomes. The idea here is we really care about the quality of the decisions that you're making. Knowing full well that you have to make sure you make decisions within a certain amount of time. You can't take forever, but also sometimes the outcome may not be what you wanted. And that's fine. This kind of goes back to the idea of taking risks or taking on big, bold bets. And at times, maybe you have to fail, or maybe it results in failure. But so long as you make decisions the right way and using the right set of trade-offs, I think that's what we really look for, is people are being thoughtful and intentional about the kind of trade-offs they're making. And one additional one, I would say is we work smart and hard. This is sort of a play on the idea that you should work smarter, not harder. Well, at Blend, we do both. It is important to do both. Obviously, we invest in the kind of technologies that we're using, the kind of problems that we're facing, what is the best, most efficient way to solve them. We have company-wide hackathons, for instance, that happen once a year. We also have this sort of focus on tech debt. And the idea here is more around just process improvements we can make or product improvements we can make. But there's also At times, we do have a situation where, something has to be delivered and we have to work hard for it. We are accountable for the features that we're delivering. We're also accountable for the services that we own. So for instance, a lot of teams that own services or microservices, they have a pager duty rotation. Sometimes a pager can even go off in the middle of the night. That is a reality. It happens very infrequently because, mainly because, for the most part, we're in the US today, and, things tend to happen during business hours, but that is a reality that at times you do have to work hard. And really what I would say there is the impact is, we're delivering this platform that is literally transforming the consumer financial space. And so that's sort of the payoff.
I've had a few questions about blockchain, so I'll just put this one out there. Are there any projects being worked on to include Web 3.0 or blockchain technologies, particularly for the consumer products or backend processes?
So I can take a tentative stab at this. I believe there were some blog posts maybe a couple years ago around some blockchain technologies that Blend was working on. I think those projects have been put on hold for now, but that is definitely something that we continuously reevaluate.
Megan and Adjoa, if you could go back to the start of your apprenticeship and give yourself some advice, what would it be?
I guess for me in the beginning, I would just say be comfortable with asking questions and just be comfortable with, like getting what you need from the apprenticeship. So what I mean by that is like the beginning, I felt like I was more so like, oh, I should know how to do this already, because they wouldn't have given me this project or they wouldn't have given me this task if I didn't know how to go about doing it or how to figure out how to do it. At the beginning, I could find myself spending hours to do something that maybe if I had just asked somebody on my team, I could have done a lot quicker. So that's something I would say is just be really comfortable, like with trusting the people on your team that they know you're an apprentice, they know you're here to learn. So by you just asking questions and leaning on them, they want to do it. Like what Megan said earlier, it's like, I've never talked to somebody at Blend that doesn't want to help you. And if anything, they'll like go out of their way to make sure that you get what you need to finish what you want to do or what you were tasked to work on. So just be comfortable with like asking questions and figuring out ways or figuring out how to leverage people on your team to accomplish the goals that you were tasked with working on and doing.
Yeah, I would say a similar thing, which is get comfortable just not understanding most of what's going on for a little while. I feel like from when I started on my team to now, the percentage of the stand-up issues that I understand has increased significantly. And I think just like that first few months, you're going to hear a lot of things you don't understand. You kind of have to pick your battles of like what you want to dive into and what you're like, okay, I'm just going to learn that later, because it's really overwhelming to learn a lot at once.
Great. And I think we have time for just one more to hear from all of the panelists. What's your favorite thing about working at Blend?
I'll start and I'll let anyone else jump in after. I think it really brings back to a few points that were made today, but the people, I think the people that we hire, the people that are on our teams, like everyone is passionate about what we do, and being able to access everyone, whether you're an apprentice or and a different job title, right? Like there's a lot of access to our employees, and there, as Adjoa mentioned, everyone's willing to help. And I think that culture has just been a great way for me to even grow my own career when I joined Blend.
Yeah, I think the people and the mission, like I talked about earlier, which kind of like is related, right? Like Jenna said, like everybody's passionate about it and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I think my favorite part, like what Megan was mentioning about the people and the mission, but specifically into the mission, like the interesting types of problems we get to tackle and work with, because within mortgage, like it is something that traditionally was more manual, and Blend is trying to make that not the case. But even within that, there's a lot of intricacies of problems that we could solve, and then how we're now expanding to product lines that are not specifically just mortgage, figuring out ways to leverage the systems we already have to process those product lines, to process those applications, and figuring out just like the different types of things we get to tackle is what I love working about. Working at Blend, there's always something new you can learn.
Yeah, I was saying, in addition to those answers, Blend is just is a great place to grow your career. I can speak personally. I joined Blend 3 years ago as an IC, and I was always very interested in being a manager, being in people management, understanding that side of the world. And so I was fortunate to get that opportunity at Blend, and I've been a manager now for about a year. And so, I've grown a lot. I've seen a lot of other people grow at Blend. We're hiring a lot of people, and we're taking on so many challenges that there's always going to be lots of opportunities for new folks that are joining to grow further in the technical track, or even take on like people management positions. Yeah, just the amount of opportunity available at Blend to grow is definitely awesome.
I just want to say thank you so much for all of our panelists from Blend for being here today, for sharing your experiences and shedding a little bit of light on what it's like to be an employee, an apprentice at Blend. To the participants, thank you so much for being here as well. I know we didn't get to all of the questions. I think we still had about 78 left unanswered, but again, you can find a lot of the answers on the role page. I will be posting a recording of this to our YouTube channel. And if you have any application specific questions, please feel free to email me at support@onramp.io. Thank you so much again to everyone, to the participants, best of luck in the application process. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Great
Dana.
questions, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.